1 Corinthians 7, 1-5 says, "Now concerning these things about which you wrote, it's good for a man not to touch a woman, but because of immoralities, each man is to have his own wife, and each woman is to have her own husband. And the husband must fulfill his duty to his wife, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have the authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Stop depriving one another except by agreement for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. And then come together again, so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." If you're joining us in reading through this 60-day reading plan, today's reading is 1 Corinthians 7, and I encourage you to read that passage. Now, in some ways, we have the pilgrims to thank for the current sexual revolution. Sex has always been viewed as a necessary part of marriage and one that will produce physical pleasure. As the pilgrims decided that physical pleasure was something that needed to be distrusted and discouraged, their views towards sexuality was very stunted. Paul understood that the sexual drive was two things. First, it was natural and desirable. Secondly, it could be controlled. In today's world, the first principle is taught, and the second principle is ignored. Paul lays out some of the grounds that are consistent with your life in Christ. First, neither partner has authority over their own body. This means that even when someone is tired, has a headache, isn't in the mood, and generally doesn't want to touch or be touched, he or she might have to put aside that feeling and deal with the spouse first. Husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church in Ephesians 5:25, and that means he must be willing to die for her so that she might live. In the world of marriage, particularly sex, that means he must be willing to satisfy her physically. Now, obviously, that means that within the realm of Christian morals. In addition, the wife is to do exactly the same thing. The second principle is one of self-control. The sexual drive is a learned, habitual thing. It can be controlled. No one can ever say that they have to have a sexual experience to live. But we can be honest, and we can say that life is very pleasant with that type of relationship. Now, I mentioned once to a group of people that if they could eat dinner without having a sexual thought, that they could control their sex drive. If they can't eat dinner without sexual thoughts, they need to begin to work on their mind. And they need to work on it changing, as in Romans 12, 1 and 2. But in verse 5, Paul lays out a very important principle, and that is that if the sexual relationship is going to stop, then it must be by mutual agreement and for only a little while. This Greek word isn't an undefined time period. It could be a day, a week, or a month, but what it isn't permanent. There must be a time when the husband and wife come back together. There are two reasons for this. First, if it's too long, that person may become frustrated and angry. Secondly, this will cause a division in the marriage. Now, but the above naturally assumes that normal sexual relations can be practiced. If the spouse is incapacitated in some way, then the other spouse, in his or her own loving of that spouse, would voluntarily give up that piece of his or her marriage or life. Sex is a gift from God. It should be used to glorify Him.